The atmosphere was tense, charged with anticipation. The room was packed with reporters, eager to capture the next great political confrontation. It wasn't just another public hearing. This was shaping up to be something bigger, something personal. The opposing sides were clear. Jasmine Crockett, a rising star with an undeniable presence, and Pam Bondi, a seasoned political figure with years of influence. But it was more than just politics at play now. This was a clash of personalities, a showdown where the stakes were higher than anyone anticipated. Pam Bondi, ever the confident politician, was used to commanding rooms. Her reputation for standing firm, often bordering on unyielding, had earned her both respect and disdain. She stepped up to the podium, her eyes narrowing as she fixed them on Jasmine, a look that could freeze anyone in their tracks. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't like anyone else. She wasn't easily intimidated, and in the midst of Bondi's biting rhetoric, she remained cool and collected. The crowd held its breath, wondering how the young politician would respond. After all, Bondi had made it clear that she wasn't going to pull punches. "This is not a game, Jasmine," Bondi's voice rang out, cutting through the air like a knife. "You can play your little political games, but this isn't about you anymore. It's about people like me who've fought for what's right." The accusation was sharp, personal even, as if she was testing Jasmine, poking at a weakness she hoped existed. But Jasmine didn't flinch. Instead, she stood taller, her eyes never leaving Bondi's. The crowd could feel it. Something was about to change. Could Bondi's attempt to undermine her backfire? How would Jasmine react to such an obvious provocation? Everyone was waiting for the moment when the tension would snap. Pam continued, her voice rising with every word. "You think you're special? That you can just waltz in and make everything better? You have no idea what it takes to survive in this arena. People like you always think they know best, but you're just a puppet in the hands of others." The venom in her words was unmistakable, but it wasn't just a critique of Jasmine's politics. It was personal. Pam was going after the very core of who Jasmine was. This was more than just a policy disagreement. This was an attack on her character. Jasmine's response came quickly, faster than anyone expected. With a calmness that only made her more formidable, she stepped up to the podium. There was no hint of fear in her stance. She didn't need to raise her voice to command attention, because her presence alone was enough. The audience leaned in, waiting for the inevitable clash. "Pam, let me stop you right there," Jasmine began, her tone measured but firm. "You think you can intimidate me with your words? That somehow your history gives you the right to belittle others? Well, I'm not here to play games, and I'm certainly not here to let you push me around." Her words were deliberate, each one carefully chosen to dismantle the argument Pam had been building. The room fell into an almost eerie silence. The reporters' cameras clicked away, but no one seemed to breathe. It was as if the very air had thickened with tension. What was coming next? Would Jasmine back down? Or would this be the moment she changed everything? Pam Bondi was caught off guard. This wasn't the reaction she'd expected. She had assumed her attack would leave Jasmine rattled, even disoriented. Instead, she was met with an unshakable resolve, a clarity of purpose that left Bondi momentarily speechless. How could this young politician stand so firm in the face of such an experienced opponent? Was this a bluff? Or was Jasmine truly as unbreakable as she appeared? But Jasmine didn't give her a chance to recover. She continued, "You talk about survival, Pam? About fighting for what's right? Maybe it's time to take a long, hard look at what fighting for what's right actually means. Maybe it's time for people like you to step aside and let those of us who truly understand the struggles of everyday Americans take the reins." It was a simple yet powerful declaration, and the impact was immediate. The crowd shifted uneasily. Could Jasmine really take down someone like Bondi with just a few well-placed words? Would this be the beginning of a new political era where the power dynamics shifted in front of everyone's eyes? The tension built to a crescendo. Pam, once confident and in control, now found herself on the defensive. She had underestimated her opponent. She had underestimated Jasmine Crockett. But what would she do now? How would she recover from this blow? As the tension lingered in the room, it was clear that the tone of the debate had shifted. Pam Bondi, a seasoned veteran of the political arena, stood at the podium, her face flushed with a mixture of disbelief and growing irritation. She had hoped to dismantle Jasmine Crockett with a few sharp words, to remind everyone of her dominance in the room. But Jasmine, with a calm confidence that seemed to exude power, had made it clear that she was not to be underestimated. The crowd could feel it. The energy in the room was different now. The young congresswoman had challenged Bondi in a way no one had dared to do before, and the audience was riveted, waiting to see how this battle would unfold. For a brief moment, Pam hesitated. Was this the end of her dominance in the conversation? Was this the point where her influence slipped away? She had assumed that her experience would be enough to crush Jasmine's rising star. But now she found herself in uncharted territory. The young woman across from her was fearless, unshaken, and that made Pam nervous. She clenched her fists, steadying herself before responding. "You don't know what it's like to fight for what's right, Jasmine. You've only been in this game for a fraction of the time. You're naive to think that your ideals will ever win in the real world." Her voice was biting, but there was a slight edge of doubt creeping into her words. Jasmine had hit a nerve. It was clear to everyone, watching, that Pam was losing control of the narrative. Was her attack on Jasmine a mistake? Would her words spiral further, or could she somehow regain the upper hand? Jasmine's response was swift, as always. She didn't allow Pam a moment to re-establish her footing. "Pam," she began, her tone unwavering. "You talk about fighting for what's right, like it's a badge of honor. But I'm not here to fight for your status quo. I'm here to fight for people who don't have the luxury of sitting at a table with people like you. People who are suffering because of policies that you and your colleagues have put into place for years." The words hit hard. There was no room for doubt in her statement. Jasmine's conviction was absolute, and her audience could sense that. Though, the crowd reacted, a ripple of murmurs passing through the room. This wasn't just political rhetoric anymore. This was something deeper. Jasmine was speaking from a place of personal experience, not just theoretical policy. She had connected with the very people Pam had so often dismissed in her speeches. But Pam was not one to back down easily. She had spent years building her reputation, and she was not about to let some young upstart destroy everything she had worked for. She locked eyes with Jasmine, her face hardening, and with a sharpness in her voice, she fired back, "You think you know what it's like? You think you're the only one who's had to fight for something? You have no idea what real struggle looks like, Jasmine. You haven't earned your seat at this table." The words hung in the air, heavy with contempt. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't allow Pam's venom to derail her. Instead, she stepped forward, her voice growing more powerful as she responded, "I don't need to earn my seat at this table, Pam. I'm here because I've earned the right to be heard. And I'm not afraid of you. You might think that your years of experience give you power over me, but all you've done is perpetuate the same broken system that keeps people like me and my constituents at a disadvantage. You've become part of the problem, Pam." A murmur of agreement swept through the crowd. People were feeling it now, the weight of Jasmine's words. She wasn't just debating, she was challenging the very foundation of the political structure that had held power for so long. And in that moment, it seemed like she might just have the power to bring it all crashing down. Pam, her face reddening with both fury and frustration, fought to maintain her composure. This was not how she had envisioned this exchange going. She had expected to dominate the conversation, to put Jasmine in her place. But instead, Jasmine was outmaneuvering her at every turn. The seasoned politician found herself on the defensive, unable to land the blow she had been so sure would silence her opponent. In a final, desperate attempt to regain control, Pam leaned into her next attack, her voice low and threatening. "You think your words can change anything, Jasmine? You're just a pawn in a bigger game. You don't know what you're up against. The people who run this country won't tolerate your kind for long." The words were meant to intimidate, but instead of provoking fear, they only fueled Jasmine's fire. She locked eyes with Pam, her voice steady but sharp as she responded. "I'm not a pawn, Pam, and I'm not afraid of the people you're talking about. I'm here to fight for those who've been left behind, people who don't have a voice in this system. And trust me, we're not going anywhere." The words resonated, and the audience was hooked. The undercurrent of emotion was undeniable. Jasmine's resolve was unshakable. She had just turned the tables completely. What would happen next? Would Pam's intimidation continue to falter? Would Jasmine's bold stand be enough to win the room over? The tension continued to rise, and the next part of the story was ready to escalate even further. The energy in the room shifted once again as Jasmine's words sank in. She had managed to turn the tide, shifting the narrative from one of doubt and disdain to one of empowerment. The crowd, once on edge, was now leaning in, hanging on every word she spoke. She had dismantled Pam Bondi's attack with grace and power, but the battle wasn't over yet. Pam, despite her growing frustration, refused to give up. She knew how to fight back when her back was against the wall, and she was determined not to lose this battle in front of the cameras. Pam's lips curled into a thin, almost imperceptible smile. She was trying to regain her footing, but the cracks in her composure were visible now. Her voice was quieter this time, but still laden with the venom she hoped would sting. "You think you're the voice of the people, Jasmine? That's rich. You have no idea what it's like to make tough decisions for the country. You're playing a game you don't understand." But Jasmine wasn't playing any game. She wasn't here for theatrics, nor was she here to follow the typical political script that so many were used to. She had taken the gloves off, and Pam's words were falling on deaf ears. The seasoned politician's attempts to belittle Jasmine only made her look more desperate. The more Pam tried to tear down her opponent, the more Jasmine rose to the occasion, unwavering in her stance. "Pam?" Jasmine's voice was steady, but there was a growing edge to it. "You keep talking about tough decisions as if you're the only one who has had to make them. But what you fail to realize is that your tough decisions have been hurting people. While you've been making deals in your ivory tower, people like me, people who look like me, come from where I come from, have been left behind, and the decisions you've made have kept us there." Her words hit harder than anything Pam could throw back at her. They weren't just criticisms, they were truths. Jasmine was pulling back the curtain on a system that had worked in favor of the privileged, and Pam could feel the weight of her accusations. She was no longer just a politician arguing a point. Jasmine was calling out the very foundation that Pam had built her career on. For the first time, Pam hesitated. She had always prided herself on her ability to stand her ground, to out-argue and outmaneuver anyone who dared question her. But now, for the first time in years, she found herself caught off guard. How could she fight back against the truth? How could she deny the impact of the policies she had supported for so long? Pam's grip on the podium tightened, and her next words were laced with frustration. "You're naive, Jasmine. The world doesn't work the way you want it to. You can't just change everything with a speech. You need to understand that compromise is the only way forward." But Jasmine wasn't interested in compromise, at least not the kind Pam was talking about. Jasmine had no interest in a status quo that kept the marginalized silent. The crowd, sensing the shift in dynamics, leaned forward in anticipation. The battle had taken a turn, and it was clear that Jasmine was not going to back down. "The kind of compromise you're talking about has been what's holding us back," Jasmine shot back, her voice ringing with passion. "We've compromised. For far too long, Pam. Compromise is just another way of saying that the people who have power don't want to give it up. We've compromised our values, our integrity, and our future for far too long." and that stops today." Her words, like an arrow, hit the bullseye. The room erupted into applause, but it wasn't just for the speech. It was for the courage Jasmine displayed in taking on someone like Pam Bondi. The established political order was being called out, and for the first time it felt like the people in the room were witnessing a shift in power. Pam, visibly rattled, took a deep breath. Her pride had been bruised, but she still wasn't ready to admit defeat. She narrowed her eyes at Jasmine, clearly calculating her next move. Pam had always been good at reading people, and she was starting to understand something about Jasmine. That was different from what she had expected. This wasn't a rookie trying to make a name for herself. This was someone who understood the stakes, someone who had the resolve to take on the system and possibly win. Jasmine didn't wait for Pam to find her words. She was done with the games, done with the political banter. She had made her point, and now it was time to drive it home. "The only reason you're standing here attacking me, Pam, is because you're afraid of the change that's coming. The people are waking up, and they're no longer willing to accept your kind of compromise. They want real change. They want justice." Her voice rang out, cutting through the tension in the room. The message was clear. Jasmine wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for the people who had been ignored, neglected, and silenced for too long. Pam stood there, defeated by her own inability to respond. She had tried everything: intimidation, belittlement, dismissiveness, but Jasmine had shut down each attack with strength and conviction. In that moment, it became painfully clear that Pam's traditional tactics had no power here. Jasmine had not only stood her ground, she had taken control of the room, the conversation, and the future of the fight. What could Pam say now? How could she recover from this? Jasmine had won the debate, and the room knew it. The question now was how far this victory would carry her, and if the tides of politics were truly beginning to change. The moment the applause started to die down, a heavy silence filled the room. Jasmine Crockett had not only shut down Pam Bondi's attacks, but she had turned the tables entirely. The seasoned politician, known for her sharp wit and ability to dominate any conversation, now found herself utterly speechless, her face flushed with anger and humiliation. For all of her experience, she had been outmatched by a force she hadn't expected: an unwavering commitment to justice and truth. The tension in the air was palpable, as if everyone in the room knew that they had just witnessed a pivotal moment. It wasn't just a debate. It was a shift in the political landscape. Pam stood at the podium, her jaw clenched and her fists tight by her sides. She had always prided herself on her ability to handle any situation with poise. But Jasmine had stripped away the armor she had carefully crafted over the years. What was left now? Was she going to bow out gracefully, admit defeat, or was she going to try one final attempt to salvage her dignity? For a moment it looked as though Pam might try to recover. She opened her mouth, but the words wouldn't come. The once confident politician, who had once dominated debates with her sharp tongue and forceful demeanor, was now stammering for the right thing to say. The crowd could feel it. Pam Bondi, the powerful and seasoned voice of authority, had been reduced to nothing more than a figure standing in the shadow of her own ego. Jasmine, on the other hand, stood tall and resolute. Her posture radiated strength, not arrogance. It was the kind of quiet confidence that made people believe that, perhaps, she was the voice they had been waiting for. With the eyes of the audience fixed on her, Jasmine had just proven that it wasn't about the years of experience you had. It was about the strength of your words and the conviction behind them. She had gone from being the underdog to a champion in a single exchange. But the battle wasn't over just yet. While Jasmine had won this round, Pam wasn't one to go down without a fight. As the room settled into a tense hush, Pam spoke again, her voice quieter now but still full of venom. "You think you've won, don't you, Jasmine? You think that because you've had your moment, you've somehow proven something. But you're wrong. This isn't over. You'll learn, eventually, that politics isn't about speeches. It's about power. And power always wins. It was an attempt to salvage whatever pride she could. But Jasmine wasn't fazed. She had anticipated Pam's response. This was the final attempt to claw back at her, and Jasmine wasn't about to let it happen. With a look of pure determination, she met Pam's gaze and responded in a tone so measured, it cut through the tension like a hot knife through butter. "I've already learned that, Pam, but power built on lies and manipulation is fragile. I'm here to fight for something real, something that doesn't rely on keeping people down to stay in control." The crowd erupted in applause again, this time even louder than before. Jasmine had not only refuted Pam's final attempt at intimidation, she had exposed the true nature of the political game that Pam had been playing all along. It was no longer about debates or talking points. It was about who had the moral high ground, who had the true power to make a difference, and who would emerge victorious in the long run. Pam's face grew darker, but she didn't respond. She stood there for a long moment as if trying to process what had just happened. She had underestimated Jasmine Crockett. She had thought that her experience and her power would be enough to put the young congresswoman in her place. But Jasmine had proven that true power wasn't about experience. It was about heart, conviction, and the courage to stand up for what was right. As the room buzzed with the energy of the crowd, it became clear that Jasmine had just achieved something monumental. This wasn't just a win in a debate. It was a statement. She had shaken the foundations of the political establishment with nothing more than the truth and the power of her voice. And in that moment, it felt like the future of politics was shifting. The old guard, represented by Pam Bondi, had been shown that the game was changing, that their tactics of intimidation and manipulation were no longer enough to hold sway. Jasmine's response to Pam's personal threat had not only stunned everyone in the room, it had inspired them. It had shown them that real change was possible, that people could fight back against the entrenched powers and win. And as Jasmine stepped back from the podium, the applause didn't stop. It was as if the entire room was rallying behind her, urging her on as she prepared to continue her fight for justice. In the end, it wasn't just about who won the debate. It was about who stood for something more. And in that moment, Jasmine Crockett had emerged not just as a political force, but as a symbol of the change that was sweeping through the country. She wasn't just a rising star, she was the future. The final moments of the confrontation were electric. The once tense room had erupted into thunderous applause, as if the entire world was behind Jasmine Crockett. She had done what many thought impossible. She had taken on a seasoned politician, like Pam Bondi, and not only held her ground but had shown that the true power of politics lay not in the ability to bully, but in the courage to speak truth to power. The lights in the room seemed brighter now, almost blindingly so, as Jasmine stood tall at the podium, her back straight and her shoulders squared. She had just changed the course of the day, of the debate, and perhaps of her own future in politics. Pam Bondi, on the other hand, stood motionless, her eyes locked on the floor, unable to meet the gaze of anyone in the room. Her attempt to dominate had backfired spectacularly, and the once untouchable political figure had now become a symbol of everything that was wrong with the current system. She had hoped to silence Jasmine, to put her in her place, but all she had done was show the world how fragile her power truly was. Jasmine's victory had been swift, clean, and absolutely undeniable. But the room was still buzzing. This was more than just a debate. It had been a reckoning. It wasn't just the way Jasmine had responded to Pam's personal threat. It was the sheer force of her comeback, her unwavering belief in herself and her cause. In a political world often dominated by intimidation and power plays, Jasmine had shown that true strength came from the ability to stand firm in your convictions, no matter the cost. She hadn't just shut Pam Bondi down. She had exposed the toxic undercurrents of the political establishment and left them reeling. As Jasmine left the stage, She was met with an outpouring of support from the audience. Some rushed to congratulate her, others were simply in awe of the way she had handled herself under pressure. For Jasmine, this was not just a win in a single debate. It was a message, a declaration that the old ways of doing politics were no longer enough. The people were tired of the games, tired of the deceit, and ready for a new era of leadership, one that was grounded in integrity, truth, and justice. And Jasmine, though exhausted, felt the weight of that moment. She had just been tested in ways that few politicians ever were. And yet, she had come through victorious. As the applause continued to echo in her ears, she couldn't help but smile. She had proven something important, not just to herself, but to the millions of people watching at home, the ones who felt unheard and disillusioned with the political system. She had shown them that they could fight back, that their voices mattered, and that change was possible. Outside the room, news outlets were already picking up the story. The footage of the debate would be replayed for weeks to come, dissected, analyzed, and shared across social media. The hashtag #JudgeJasmineForChange was already trending, with people expressing their admiration for her performance and her unwavering confidence. It wasn't just that Jasmine had won the debate. It was that she had sparked a fire in the hearts of millions. Her message had resonated deeply, and the ripple effects of this moment would be felt for a long time to come. Pam Bondi, in contrast, would likely spend the next few days trying to salvage her reputation, issuing statements that tried to downplay her loss. But it was clear to everyone who had watched the debate that she had been outclassed. The public had seen through the facade of political power she had built for herself, and now they knew the truth. In the battle of ideologies, Jasmine had proven that standing firm in your values was more powerful than any amount of political maneuvering or backroom deals. As the dust settled and the crowds dispersed, one thing was abundantly clear. Jasmine Crockett was a force to be reckoned with. She wasn't just a rising star. She was a beacon of hope for a new generation of leaders. And in the months and years to come, people would look back on this moment as the turning point in her political career. The moment when she went from a relatively unknown congresswoman to one of the most influential voices in the nation. The world had just witnessed the birth of a new political powerhouse, and nothing would ever be the same again.